welcome to Give God 90 Radio on Demand. My name is Jerry Mitchell, your host for Give God 90. Thank you so much for joining me, and you have no idea how honored I am when I look at the numbers and I see people listening, downloading, and just interacting with these podcasts. It is such a pleasure, really, to see people that are interested in hearing what the Almighty has to say and how we can improve our lives today by looking at the Bible and at Scripture and seeing how He designed us to live. Okay, if you are among the new folks who are joining Give God 90, we have new people listening all the time now. If you choose so, there is an app for that, free for your Apple or Android device. Somebody else has paid for it, so you don't have to. You can download that, and it gives you a lot of opportunity to go back and listen through about almost 2 years of archives now. There are a lot of things that are put out there. One of the most downloaded, most played, and you can search for this, it's called What's Wrong with the Yellow Cow? And it talks about the Golden Calf event and how that one single event in the history, not just of Israel, but in the history of humanity, really is such an important part of world history. It really gives you a lot to think about in that episode, and I encourage you to continue to spread that out there, because it really is a When I did that episode, I didn't think it was that great, but the more people talk about it, it really speaks to a lot of people, and I encourage everyone to listen to that. Today I want to look at something, and it's kind of hard to explain this, because in the English-speaking world, we have a little bit of a problem with this thing called freedom. Because when we look at the Bible and we try to grasp this concept of freedom, even in the United States, where we talk about freedom a lot, even as this thing called democracy spreads around the world, and as I'm recording this, I'm looking at some of the news reports coming out of Hong Kong where the demonstrators are looking at democracy. That's not quite the freedom I want to talk about. What I want to look at is this concept of biblical freedom. What it means, how are we supposed to react to this concept in Scripture? Because really, when we dig into the words and we see what's going on, the idea of freedom is separated into a couple of different, I guess the best way to describe that is not concepts, but they're two different varying opinions of freedom in Scripture. One deals with we are no longer a slave to something, whether it is a slave to sin, whether it is a slave to a human master or a demon-type master, if you will. The other is a more important type of freedom. And we see that first in Genesis chapter 2, where most English translations will talk about Adam being able to eat freely from any tree of the garden except for this one certain tree, right? He could not eat from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. That was his one restriction. But the way it is described in English, it says, from the other trees you may freely eat. Now, in English, that kind of makes sense, right? Because, you can just eat anything except here. This is the only, it's kind of like when you tell a young child, You can go in any room of the house except this room. Right? Well, now all of a sudden, there must be something about this room that just, there's something in there Mom and Dad don't want us to see. It doesn't matter about the rest of the house because now it focuses on this room. We do the same thing when we see what's going on here. Now, in the original Hebrew, it doesn't say you are free to eat because there's no real concept for that. What it's actually, it's a double emphasis, if you will, because in the original Hebrew it says, of any tree of the garden you may eat. Just go ahead and eat. You can eat, just eat it. It's a double emphasis. But most English translations don't like that because it's hard to understand in English. So what they do is they say you may freely eat. Okay? I hope that makes sense because it's the way it's expressed, especially in our modern concepts, in our modern language, the way the language has evolved, we don't get that same emphasis. When we read it in English today, we kind of skip over it a little bit because, we know this story. We know what it entails. You could do this, but you can't do that. And we focus on what you can't do. We have become a society worldwide where we focus on the negative instead of on the positive. And that double emphasis in the Hebrew language, it says don't focus on the negative, focus on the positive. Which is why it says, of any tree, just eat. Help yourself. Go and eat. But not this one. It's kind of almost like an afterthought. But because of some of the other things that have happened now, we focus on the negative. Now, in Exodus chapter 20, we get just a little bit of a change in that because what we see when the Almighty speaks, He introduces Himself and He says, I am Yehovah, your God. Okay? He is accepting, he's actually confirming the covenant, confirming the contract He's about to make with the mixed multitude at Sinai. And He goes on and He describes Himself, I brought you out of the land of Egypt. I am bringing you out of bondage. Now, when He says this, it's still an emphasis on the positive because what He's saying is you are no longer where you were. All right? He is focusing on a positive. Don't worry about where you were. Think now about where you're going. And where I want to go with this concept, this conversation, is we focus today on the negative. We read the Bible and we read, the Ten Commandments as a list of don'ts. Thou shalt nots. However you want to describe it, that's what we see. That's what we focus on. But really, when you think about it, there is an extremely limited amount of things we cannot do. We have this great big house, and our Creator is saying, okay, out of this entire huge house that you live in, here's the one door you can't, or here's the couple of doors you can't go in, right? You don't go through the door of stealing. You don't go through the door of adultery. You don't go through the door of testifying falsely against your neighbor. But look at all the things that you can do, okay? But we don't think about all the things we can do. We think about those things that we can't do because we focus on the negatives. Let's not focus on the negatives. Let's think about the things we can do today. Now, currently in the news, we turn on the news and we see the big thing this week is the protesters in Hong Kong wanting freedom. They want more. They want to be able to do more things. They want to be able to go more places and have this idea of freedom because they have been living in a negative situation under dictatorships for so long. Now they have a certain amount of freedom, and they are certainly increasing their standard of living all the time. But now they think they're ready for that next step, because now they want to eat. Just go and eat. They want to know. They want to see and experience what free people have. There's another example that we can see if we look at England today. They're going through this deal where they want to, well, not just England, but Great Britain in general. They want to pull out of the European Union. And there's this big struggle among the people in that nation today where some of them are focusing on the negatives. And they're saying, well, if we just pull out, and they call it a no-deal Brexit. And they say, if we don't have this list of things that we can and can't do, how do we know what we're going to be able to do? They're focusing on the negative. I'm going to take the opposite stance here. I'm going to say, look, if you leave something and you don't have this list of do's and don'ts, you are free then to make your own way. You have the freedom. It is exactly like being brought out of the house of bondage. When God said, I brought you out of this house of bondage, now you're free to do anything. You have this huge house. Now, here's just a couple of things you can no longer do. You can't murder. Okay, you can't commit adultery, you can't steal, you don't testify falsely against your neighbor, and you don't covet what your neighbor has. Other than that, you can do all the good you want to do. You can love on each other, you can be servants to each other, you can help each other. The only thing you can't do is harm each other. But look at and that's what they focus on. They don't focus on how much good you can do. They focus on, well, I can't hurt that person. It doesn't matter if you go out and you say, well, what I really want to do is make sure that my neighbor has all the food they need to eat. My neighbor has, a warm place to sleep. My neighbor has this. My neighbor has that. No, what we focus on is, I can't hurt somebody. Don't worry about focusing on, I can't hurt somebody. What you need to focus on is all the good, all the positive that you can do. But we see that today. I don't want to encourage you to turn the news on, because it's actually discouraging when you watch it. Because what we see is people focusing on the negative. What we see is the problems. What we see is the trouble. What we see is the turmoil. When what we need to be doing is looking at all the good. Making sure that people are enjoying how much freedom they have. Now, when God said in Exodus chapter 20, I brought you out of all of that junk that you were doing, what we're focusing on today is going back. Well, when you focus on the negative, you are no longer free to do all the things that your Creator has designed you to do. When you're focusing on the negative, when you're focusing on that door that you want to walk, that you want to see what's behind it, you're ignoring the rest of the house. When you ignore the rest of the house and you're only standing there trying to peek through the keyhole, so to speak, what have you turned your back on? When you are so intent on what you can't do, then you are blind to all of the things that you can do. You know, sometimes we learn so much from people who have been through hardship, don't we? I know people who are, one person in particular who has been through a terrible, terrible, terrible car accident. All right? Now, this person years ago was in a terrible car accident with 3 other people. Okay? 3 of them did not survive. One person survived and is currently in a wheelchair. Has been now for, I believe, about 15 years. But that person doesn't concentrate on the things they can't do. They concentrate on the positive, because that person has others around them who are encouraging them, saying, you know, yeah, sure, there's a couple things you can't do, but look at all these things you can do. Look at the abilities that you still have. Look at what you can do with your hands. Look at what you can do with your mind. Look at what you can do. You know, don't worry about the technology that can help you. Just do. Just go. Just do. Another friend of mine was in a terrible car accident. And he has a debilitating and actually a terminal disease from that. But it doesn't stop that person. They continue to go and to do. To use the skills, to use the talents that they are designed with to encourage others, to show others a path. If these people focused on the negative, where would they be today? They certainly wouldn't be the people that they are. They would be miserable. They would be downtrodden. They would be the ones that you think you have to help. But instead, because they didn't stand in front of that door looking through the keyhole, turning their back on everything they could do, they faced what they could do. They accepted the challenge and they went and did it. They focused on the positive. In Hong Kong, there's a huge number of people, a growing number of people who are focusing on the positive. They see what they view as freedom through democracy. Okay? And I don't want to get political with all of that. I am using this as an example to display they have had enough of the negative. They've had enough of the negative. They say, we're done with the negative stuff. We don't like the negative stuff. We want to focus on the positive. We want to turn around and look at this huge house we live in and enjoy it. Just like in Great Britain today, there are a few people who want to peek through the keyhole and ignore all the things that they have the potential to do. Where there are others who are looking out there and saying, "Who cares? We're coming out of this house of bondage where we know there's things we can't do, where we know there's things we are restricted in." And what they're looking at is all the rest of the house that they can see. In the United States today, and here is a little bit of a political statement, okay? Just a short one. We have more restrictions today under our current government than we did in 1776 when we won against tyranny. We fought against tyranny and won. Today we have voluntarily given over our freedoms. You can't even open a lemonade stand. And there are certain communities where you can't paint your house without permission from your neighbors. Okay? No matter how much it needs it, you can't paint your house unless you have permission from your neighbors. That's kind of ridiculous. We're focusing on the negative when we need to turn around and look at how great and wonderful the rest of the house is. And if we turn around and look at how great and wonderful the rest of the house is, you know what? It doesn't matter about the negatives, because we can brush those aside. With a stroke of a pen, well, actually in the United States, first it takes an agreement among disagreeable people, okay? But then with a stroke of a pen, all of that junk can go away, and we can focus on all the good stuff we can do. Isn't it sad that in the United States today, you can't help someone for fear of being persecuted because you help someone? Isn't that terrible? We think that we can't do good because we might get in trouble for it. We're focusing on the negative. Our Creator says, I took you away from all that. Why do you want to keep going back? Why do you insist on going back to where I brought you out of? Why do you insist on going back to the place that I didn't design you to live to begin with? Why do you insist on going back to something that's going to harm you? Why do you insist on going back to something that's going to take you away from all of the benefits, all of the improvements, all of the glory, all of the everything good that's in the rest of the house? You want to stand in front of that door and peek through the keyhole and keep trying the doorknob. But the Almighty says, turn around and look at what's in the rest of the house. Go explore all the things you can do. Go explore all the other rooms. Go explore all of the good stuff that you can do. Don't worry about the bad stuff I tell you not to do. Go explore all this wonderful, wonderful house that I've given to you. Go explore the skills that you have. Use them, test them. Find out if you have what it takes to help that person in that room or someone in another room. Find out what you need to do to help someone out there in the rest of the house. Do something other than stand in front of that door where I'm telling you shouldn't be and try to open it. You see, ladies and gentlemen, we have been taught. We have been taught to see the negatives. We have been taught to worry about the negatives. We have been taught to consider all the bad stuff. We haven't been taught. We haven't been trained. We haven't been instructed to go explore the rest of the house. When you take a young child and you say, look, if you go in here, you might get hurt. Whether it's a sewing room, whether it's a hobby room, whatever it may be. There were rooms in the house where I grew up in. There was one room in particular where there were things in there that my father kept that were sharp. He was a farmer. He was a contractor. He worked. He built stuff. He designed stuff. He was working with wood and metal. There were things in there when you were young that would hurt you until you learned how to use them. And once you developed the skills to use certain tools, then that door was open. Don't worry about the doors that the Almighty tells you not to go in until He says, now I want you to see what's in that room. When He tells you He wants you to see what's in the room, He will show it to you. When He tells you, you can go there. You can go there. But until then, until that time. Just like Adam and Eve were not allowed to eat from the tree of knowledge of good and evil until they were ready, and they ate from it before they were ready, eventually they would have gotten it. It was there for a reason, and the reason was not to test them. The reason it was there was he decided, he said, now don't eat from this until I tell you you're ready. We would have eventually had that knowledge when we were ready, when we as humans could have discerned it, could have used it, could have developed those certain things. But Eve was deceived, and they ate from that tree before they were ready. And look where we are today. In your life, if you want to stand in front of that place you're not ready to go and concentrate on that, you're missing the best part of your life. You're missing the absolute things that your Creator wants you to have, because He wants you to explore the rest of the house. He wants you to explore all the freedom that you have to do all of the good that you can, to display all of the love that you can for everyone else. He wants you to turn around, walk away from that door, and go look and see what's out there. You want to improve your life? Don't concentrate on the negatives. I said a while ago, we learn a lot from people who have been through hardships. I know people who have survived severe debilitating diseases. A couple of them really shouldn't be alive today. But they survived. They don't concentrate on their disease. They concentrate on life. They concentrate on the people around them. They concentrate on the people who they can help. That's what they do. That's what we're designed to do, is help the people. Not the ones standing in front of the doors they don't want to go through. But we help the people in the rooms and the rest of the house. You really want to improve your life? Stop looking through the keyhole. Stop jiggling the doors. Turn around and explore the rest of the house. Use the skills your Creator gives to you to help others. Use the skills your Creator gives to you to see who you need to benefit, so that you in turn can receive the blessings that your Creator chooses to give to you. You really want to improve your life? It's really as easy as treating someone else the way you would like to be treated yourself. It's that easy. It's that simple. And it starts when you choose to turn around and say, okay, I'm going to go look at the rest of the house. I want to explore all the good things I can do. I want to see what I can do. I want to help other people. That's where it starts. Your choice. It is your choice to turn around and go do it. It's your choice to say, okay, God, you designed me, you made me. Teach me the skills that you gave me. Show me how to hone those skills. Show me how to sharpen my crafts so that I can go out and help other people help themselves. Folks, I hope now that you have this better concept of how free you are to go explore the rest of the house. I hope you have this understanding now that it's not concentrating on the negatives. It's exploring all the positive things we can do. And I hope it's been a blessing to you. It's been a pleasure to bring a positive message to you. Have a wonderful, wonderful week.